G'day everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we will be doing some work on the VL Turbo. That's right, the RB30 Turbo build that I've done entirely myself besides wiring, paint and tuning. To say that I'm proud of it is an understatement. The car is doing perfectly in everything that we've asked it to do. However, there is one very small issue which we had on the dyno. So last week, I was very, very excited, very hyped up. We were taking the car to get its final dyno tune. We'd run the engine in for around about 800 kilometers without missing a beat at all. The thing is perfect. I did a compression test and I'll throw the compression test photos up here and you'll see them all exactly perfect. 145, I think it is, PSI across every single cylinder. Exactly, like within half a PSI, they were all perfect with each other. So again, to say that I'm proud is an understatement. This car is doing awesomely. However, we got to the dyno and there was an issue. Once we started to go over 5,000 RPM, we noticed that the fuel pressure on the fuel pressure regulator started to drop down quite a bit. That's to do with a couple of reasons. The first reason is I'm running the standard fuel feed hoses from the fuel tank to the fuel rail to the RACEWORKS fuel rail here. On most JDM cars, even though this is a Holden Commodore, it does have the Nissan Skyline engine in it. You can get away with running the factory hard lines all the way up to the front. Bigger fuel rail, bigger injectors, bigger fuel pump at the other end, a bigger fuel pressure regulator, and it's usually pretty good. However, on this one, we do need to upgrade to some larger -8 lines, which we'll go over in just a moment. And the other thing is we are running a 340 litre per hour fuel pump, which can do with the right lines and everything, which can do 500 or 600 horsepower. So I'm told by the graphs and everything from RACEWORKS. And again, the pump is absolutely perfect, but the fuel lines and the restriction from there doesn't quite feed us enough fuel. The next issue and the main issue, which I'll let George talk about, and I'll let him explain what the issue is, how you fix it. He's come across it a million times and he knew right away what it was. So just goes to show the pros know what they're doing. They've been there, they've found the mistakes, made the mistakes, learned from them, and now they've got the solution. So we're going to take all of his advice on board. So we'll flip over to George, go back to the future and let him explain what's going on, and I'll be back in a moment to show you what we're going to do with the car. So I've run into a couple of small issues today, and you being the tuner, you're the best person to explain it. So what happened with the RPMs and then also the fuel situation? Okay,
so at the start we're getting a rev limiting issue at about 5100 RPM, and we quickly found that it wasn't ECU related, so it'd have to be mechanical. So the first port of call on a dizzy car is to have a look at the phasing in the distributor. Yep. We've done that real quick. And it is instant fix. So what was happening at high RPM at that 5100 is the RPM wanted to jump posts because it was in between sort of the two posts of the cylinders of what it was firing. So that was a quick and easy fix. And then we moved on to obviously tuning past that 5000, and that's when we found it was leaning off. So I started punching in numbers and putting more fuel, and when the numbers don't change and the fuel numbers go up but the wideband numbers don't change, then we know we've got a fuel pressure issue or a fuel flow issue, and that's when I got you to look at the reg during one of the runs, and it was instant.
So the next thing we did a run. I watched the fuel pressure gauge on the RACEWORKS fuel pressure regulator, and it was going up as the boost crept, but then all of a sudden it would start to drop back, and that was because, and George has experienced this a million times, is there is no fuel return going back into the swirl pot in the tank. These older cars, the way they're designed, there's a little catcher where the fuel pump sits in and it sucks the fuel out, and there's meant to be a return line going back into there, and pretty much all of them, that line's just
deteriorated.
Rotted away.
It's rotted away over
nearly
being 40 years. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
So what's the fix?
Well, the fix that I usually do to them, because you can't get your hand in there because it's only like a 50 mil 2.5 inch hole that you can't get in there to hose clamp and stuff like that. So I've always removed the tank, cut the top off it, rerouted, put a new line in there, a more sort of fuel friendly hose that's going to last another 20-30 years at least, and then we weld the top back on. Because it's on the top, once the fuel tank goes back up, the standard fuel tank, you never see it, so you'll never know. So that's my fix. I've always done that, and this probably would be tank number 15 that has come through the shop that's happened. It's very common.
Yeah, they design them well, Holden. So while I'm in there, I'm going to change the fuel line as well, so it's got a bigger, fatter feed line to go to a -8. At the moment, I thought I could get away with running the factory lines, but the hard lines, they look a bit bigger than what I'm used to on the Hondas, but it's definitely not big enough for the power of the RB. So I'll put a -8 line in there, so all new RACEWORKS lines, and I've got a Walbro 460, which I'll swap out while I'm in there as well.
Might as well.
We've already got all the new wiring, so we did all of that.
Oh, that's good.
Before.
That's good. Yeah.
So
there shouldn't be a voltage issue there.
Yeah, just plug and play.
Cool. That's it, and then bring it back, and then we'll be able to start putting some boost into it. And because you have then done that upgrade on the fuel lines, E85 is now a more realistic thought to consider.
Probably twisted my arm. I'll probably put a flex in there now.
Okay, if you want to.
I was avoiding that just because I was being lazy and I just wanted to be one or the other. But yeah, I've got the flex sensor and the RACEWORKS bracket, so I'll get all that set up, put in the car, and do it all at the same time. That way, it's future-proof for the next person who owns the car.
Awesome, man. Otherwise, yeah, we managed to. Regardless of not having the end result that we wanted, it's still a good day on the dyno.
Definitely, we fixed a couple of really small issues that were easy. We know what the problem is now.
100%.
We can fix that.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it's more of a hiccup, really. It's not really an issue or a problem. It just means more time in the shed working on cars.
That's cars, though.
Yeah,
that is cars. You know, you can't get them perfect straight up.
I'm glad those are the issues and not something worse.
Of course, absolutely. The last thing you want to do is pull a motor out for something.
Alrighty, so doing a little bit of midnight motors, and I'm going to stick this in one of the other VL videos. But we're actually replacing these old Munro shocks that have been in the car. Doing the run-in Ks on the VL, I noticed every now and then there would be a little knock in the rear. And I just, I had a look at everything up on the hoist. Everything looked fine. There was no wear marks or witness marks of anything tapping or knocking. So I figured it would be these top bushes in the shocks. Now I've already taken one out. This is the driver's side. The noise was actually coming from the passenger side, so it'll be interesting to see what that one looks like. But these bushes are crushed tiny thin, and they're actually put in upside down. So there's these little washers like this, and they've got a little dome on them. So they're domed in. Now these were actually up this way with the bush placed on top of that on the shock. Now, that's all well and good. It looks like a good idea because it's holding the bush inside there. The bush is a lot smaller than this, and when it squishes up, it squishes out the side. Kind of like the discs in your spine, squishes up in between your vertebrae. But you're actually supposed to run these upside down and put the bush on there so that you get maximum articulation on the shock when the shock moves like that. With the bush like this and the washer like that, it can move like this. When it's under like that, it can't move very far at all, and it'll actually knock and contact on different parts of the body. So these ones were actually installed incorrectly. The bottom bushes down here, which go onto the diff or the axle, they're actually pretty thrashed and flogged out as well. Not sure if you can see that, but yeah, they're not supposed to look like that. So we're going to swap them over to these awesome new ROADSAFE STR shocks. Now these are brand new to the market, and I actually happen to know the bloke who designed them and organised all the valve coding and testing to make sure the product is awesome. Now I've already fitted the driver's side one up, as I mentioned earlier. They come nicely packaged, so they're not going to shoot out the side of the box. And they come with brand new nuts and washers in the bag, ready to go. And in fitting the first one, I can tell you it's already going to be a large improvement over what was in there. And we've got the brand new bushers in the bottom, and we've got the brand new bushers and washers for the top. So what you actually want to do is put them on like this so that they can articulate properly. And then the small hole, so there's a small flange and a bigger flange. The bigger one goes on the top, the smaller one goes through the middle like that, and it pinches into the boot floor, and it can move around and give you plenty of articulation. So good thing. Now these RoadSafe street shocks are actually designed for a sports ride, and unlike these Munro Gas, which are designed for carrying a load and towing, these ones are actually slightly shorter, as you can see there. So about 15 mil shorter, which means they've still got the right amount of stroke and everything for comfort, cruising and handling, but they're not designed for carrying a load. These are the STR for street. So these are the street performance ones from RoadSafe. They're going in, they're nice, they're shiny, they're black, it matches the theme. I'll show you what it looks like when they're in the car underneath. They're all in now, the shocks are in, but just in case you're wondering, it's real simple. There's 2 screws, pop that cover off, and then underneath there is just one nut, and undo that, pull the shocks out, one at the bottom. It's the most simplest shock removal that you could ever do. Now, check this out, we're gonna go under the car now. Alrighty, so we've got the shocks in, and you'll notice that I'm not doing this on my hoist. I'm doing it on the ground, and the reason for that is, I'm just going to assume that none of the suspension was put in correctly the first time around. So I've undone all of the lower control arms and upper control arms nuts and bolts, just so they're loose, and the car is sitting under its own weight, which is pretty much where it will be at ride height normally. So now that that's all loosened off, the car is now sagged and settled. I've jumped in and out of the boot a couple of times to let the suspension move around up and down. And now I'm going to tighten everything up under its own weight so that when the car is back on the ground, all the rubber bushes and everything are all perfectly tightened at ride height so they don't wear out any of the bushes, and so the car doesn't sit at any weird angles as far as the height of the car goes. Because if you tighten them up at the wrong angle, then the car will sit unlevel. So yeah, just a tip for everyone. Thanks for the explanation, George. Now, just to show you guys in real time on the car what it actually is that we're going to be doing. We're going to be taking out these fuel lines here all the way up to the front of the car. We'll just undo these clips, pull the lines out that we need. Not all of them will come out because one of them is the brake line, so we'll need to leave that one in. And then we need to remove the factory style brand new fuel filter which we put in, drain out the tank, pull out the fuel pump which is brand new in there. We'll have to find another project to put that in. Pull the fuel tank out. We're gonna need to then defume the fuel tank, which would mean filling it up with water, get all the petrol out of there, and by filling it up with water, it's actually going to stop it from getting any air and moisture and stuff in there, which will, as you know, these are prone to getting rusty, so that'll fix all of that up. And then we need to make the fuel return line, or the fuel feed line, the fuel return line, and then we need to also sort out this fuel return line and get that to go back over to the bowl, which lives about here somewhere, and that's where the fuel pump sits in its little bucket over here. As George mentioned, what was happening is the line inside here is perished. More than likely, it's not returning the fuel back to the fuel pump, so when the fuel's pumping all the way to the front of the car, it empties that little bowl, and then we've got no fuel. So luckily we were on the dyno when this happened, and we were able to stop the car, stop the run, and not do any damage to anything. There's still plenty of fuel going in, no dramas there, but we just noticed the pressure drop off. That is the fix. So that brings me to the next thing, which is the exciting thing, which is car parts. What we have over here is a whole bunch of stuff from RACEWORKS. So shout out to Jamie and also Scott for your advice on what we should do. We have a Walbro 525 fuel pump. This has a 10mm outlet. 340 litre RACEWORKS pump has an 8mm outlet, so it's going to be letting more fuel out. We then have this special hose which won't perish in E85. It's a special fuel line. It's made of nylon, and we'll clamp that to the top of the fuel pump and then out to a bulkhead fitting, which is pretty exciting, which is this guy here. It's a brand new product, and it basically means you drill a hole, put that through, tighten that up, and it won't leak. Now, if anyone's worried about that leaking, over here on the Holden fuel tank that is 40 years old is a piece of cork. Not rubber, not nylon, it's actually cork. So just a basic gasket. It's at the bottom of the fuel tank, so it's soaked in fuel pretty much all of its life, doesn't leak. So this one, we're gonna probably mount this up a little bit higher, up here somewhere. Hopefully you can see that. There's a flat spot there, up higher, just to be safe, and it'll mean that there's less of a bend in that nylon hose. And it'll give us plenty of room for the fittings out of there. So what we've got here is a push-on fitting here, which will go into that hose, clamped on tight, won't leak, won't come off. Then we have a -8 line. This is very important. We're going from a -6 to a -8 line all the way through. We have these special RACEWORKS line separators, which are going to hold the -8 line all the way up to the front of the car. We're going to replace the fittings on the fuel rail. So we've got the in and the out here, and then we're going to run these special push lock fittings for the -8 rubber line, keeping it all stealth, black, easy. Yes, I could do braided lines all the way through, and yes, it does look cool, etc, etc. However, if you get them wrong, you don't know that you've got them wrong until you start the car and fuel starts pissing out everywhere. So we're not going to risk that. We've got a special tool here, which is a crimping tool. Here it is. I just needed to cut away and open the box. We've got these special crimping pliers, which crimp these special crimping hose clamps. And we're going to just sacrifice one now. Hopefully we don't run out. And it's just a matter of getting them on here like this and pinching the heck out of it. And then do that on both sides. And then you won't have any issues with hose clamps breaking, coming undone, getting loose, vibrations, any of that sort of stuff. It'll be clamped on, won't go anywhere, and you get that as tight as you can. The barbs on the fittings in here will stop any leakage, movement, anything like that. Now the fuel hose that we're using is E85 compatible. It's from RACEWORKS also, -8 400 series hose. We've got 10 meters of that, which should be plenty. And this stuff is rated to 250 PSI. I'm not sure of the exact heat range, but it can get quite hot. Obviously we're running fuel through it, so it's not going to get warm. You can use push lock fittings. Now these will not come undone and won't leak or anything unless you're punching heat through them, and lots of PSI. So Jamie just gave me a little tip, which I'll give to you guys, which is anything over 70 PSI and anything over 70 degrees, put a clamp on it. Otherwise, you won't need to do that. But we've got this tool now. I'm going to be crimping everything from now on. It's going to be so much easier, neater, looking better, all of that stuff. Because we're running -8 lines now, we need to run a new high flow fuel filter with -8 in and out. So we've got one of those from RACEWORKS. And you'll notice we also have a nice billet bracket, and we've got a flex fuel sensor. To mount that up to the lines, we've got these fittings here, which will clamp onto there and give us the option to then run -6 or -8 or whatever we want to run back off the return. We're going to put this on the return side. So once the fuel has gone through, we don't have any restrictions. As the fuel's going back to the tank, it's measuring the ethanol content, reporting back to the Haltech, and then adjusting the tune to suit. So this is going to be a really good thing for future-proofing the car. What I was thinking was to run it on 98. That way the next owner can go to any servo in Australia, put 98 in it, and have happy days, boosting, dosing everywhere. However, if you do want more power and you do want to turn it up, future-proofing for the future is running E85, but it's not available everywhere. You're using quite a lot more fuel whenever you do go anywhere. And if you say you wanted to go to the nearest drag strip, for me it's Heathcote. It's about a 2-hour drive. We would probably run out of ethanol there, and we can't buy it unless we buy it from the track or take it with us. So what we can do is fill the car up with 98, drive 2 hours, chuck in some ethanol, it'll adjust everything, drive home, fill up on 98, and we're all good to go. So that's what we're gonna do. Easier said than done, and for you guys it's gonna look really easy because we just gotta undo some of the old fittings, replace them with new fittings, put some hose on, crimp it, cut it, done. A little bit trickier in the fuel tank side. We're gonna have to cut a hole in the top of the fuel tank and make sure everything mounts up. I'll get Vel out from Advanced Autotronics to come and wire in the sensor, and also just to triple check the wiring on the fuel pump, so we've got all of the amps that we're gonna need. And one more thing we're gonna do while we're in there is we're gonna remove the gauge from the engine bay, and we're gonna run a RACEWORKS pressure sensor. Now this is gonna tell the Haltech how much fuel pressure we're running. So if anything ever does happen, if we blow a fuse and the fuel pump stops halfway through a race, or driving along the road and, I don't know, a stick smashes the fuel tank or something like that, and we start to lose fuel pressure, as soon as it reads any variant of fuel pressure here, it will tell the Haltech. The Haltech engine protection will tell the car to shut off so we don't hurt our forged RB. So for now, I'm gonna do the really fun job. I've been looking forward to it since last week, which is draining fuel out of the fuel tank. Don't ask me how. You wear gloves, you dress up, all that sort of stuff. You are very, very careful, but somehow you end up getting fuel in your armpit, down your arm. You end up tasting some of it. I don't know how or why it happens, but yeah, this job is gonna suck. But I'm gonna do that, save you guys the hassle, and I'll show you what I'm doing along the way with these new RACEWORKS products. Well, all the hard work is done. The fuel tank is out. I'll show you later, but I've done the front hoses and lines. This is the old fuel pump. You would have seen it in the video about the first start when Vel did all the wiring with all nice mil-spec wiring. Everything's all perfect there, but we're gonna have to undo that now and change some connectors. Hopefully this wiring here is good enough to support any fuel pump we want to throw in it, but I'm not sure about the plug, how that's going to affect things. We've got the Walbro 525. Funny that everyone, including myself, still calls them a Walbro. TI Automotive now do Walbro, and we get those through RACEWORKS. So we have this guy. This is the Walbro 525 or EFP 530. These are also on the spoolup.com.au website. This will flow more than we need to in the VL, but I'm going to run this in the standard hanger so I don't have to make a new bracket for that. We'll then run this hose from the top of there out to the top of the tank, and then connect that onto the bulkhead fitting. And this will be a return line now, which will put the fuel right back at the base here, and we won't have any issues at all with the fuel drain. I'll put an extra bit of hose on there so that it's pointing in the right spot to fill up the bowl where this sits in. Let's go over to the tank now and take a look. I've got the light so you guys can see. And down in there is the bowl that we're talking about. And if you look just here, there's a hose that should have been connected back to the bottom of the bowl there to fill that up. Now what we're going to need to do is cut a hole in the top of this guy, big enough to get my hand in as a minimum, so we can put some hose clamps on and get all those lines running back to where they're supposed to. I'll clean the tank again, paint the tank again, and then get it all fitted back in as it is supposed to. This is what's left of the return line. It was supposed to be feeding back the fuel to the bowl. Now, let's go take a look over here. I have cut a hole in the tank. I've given it a bit of a clean up and a pressure wash. Let's see. There you go, that's a bit better. So there is a little nipple there, which I guess that's what it's called. And that feeds over to this one here via a small hose. And that's called a swirl pot. And that swirls the fuel back in and keeps that all full. Notice it's not fully sealed, so that even when it's not returning back, the fuel can still flow in there, but it does help having that there. You'll also notice that the tank is pretty crusty inside. Now, as crusty as this isn't anything near as crusty as most VL sedan tanks are. Just in general, old cars in general, even 20-year-old Honda Civics look like this inside the fuel tank. And that's a result of leaving your car half full when you park it, and also them being old, and also them being made out of tin. Mainly when you have moisture inside the tank and it's half full, the rest of it is oxygen, and moisture and oxygen make rust, and that's why it looks like this. Alrighty, so we fitted the bulkhead fitting to the tank. There it is, just there. Now I measured it with the verniers first. It was 18 millimeters in diameter for the thread. So I was able to drill an 18 mil hole with my stepper drill. As you can see by the metal shavings everywhere. Thread that in very tight with the nylon washer there. And I gave this surface, which is on a curve, a little bit of a tap so it's flat. Just a tap with the hammer. And then over here you can see inside there is the barbed end of the bulkhead fitting, and it just requires tightening on with another nylon washer on this side and a -10 spanner, whatever you can get in there that fits that size. Tighten the buggery out of it and then you're done. One step closer to the perfect in-tank VL fuel system. Alrighty guys, it is a whole week later from what you just saw, and it's cold here in Melbourne, so I'm wearing a beanie. But I've done everything I said I would. We've fitted in the bulkhead fitting. We have also, let me get a light in there. So that goes into there. We've got the -8 line straight from the Walbro 530 pump. Fuck's sake. We've got the -8 line, goes from the bulkhead down to the Walbro 530. That's all been soldered on, and we've used the correct heat shrink, which is fuel safe. We've got the flexible hose, which is one of the returns, or the original return, straight back to the bowl now. I have pushed 150 psi of air through that just to clean it all out and blow out the tank, so it's not going to pop off. There's a barb on there, and we've got a hose clamp on this side because there's no barb. And we've also got the other one from the original feed line. So this usually comes out of the pump and then comes out down here to feed the fuel rail, but we've got this bulkhead now, so we don't need that. So both of those are putting fuel straight back into the bowl, right at the base of the fuel pump, so that we're never going to be missing any fuel ever again. The next thing to do now though, I've already gone ahead and cleaned that up, is to weld back in this plate. Be going very carefully to make sure that there's no holes or anything in there. Worst case, I get another piece of steel and put over the top of there. Well, that's it for the fuel system. It is done. Check out what we've got here in the engine bay. Now, one thing we did differently this time around is we've added in a -8 Y piece. Now, pretty tricky to see because everything is black and stealth, but there it is, just there. And it actually feeds from the fuel tank, runs all the way up here, splits into two, goes -8 to the front, -8 over to the back into the fuel rail. Both of those meet in the middle, smash, heaps and heaps of fuel pressure. Then we go -8 out of the fuel rail. It goes down and up in a little bit of a U shape, straight in here, -8 into the fuel regulator. And you'll notice we actually have a fuel pressure sensor in here now. all from PAT and RACEWORKS. I figured we would use it because it's right here, nice and easy to use, and this plug was actually already in the Haltech loom. So why wouldn't we utilize that? This is extra engine protection. So we've got the oil pressure sensor and we've got the fuel pressure sensor. If either of these two things go below a set parameter, the car will shut off immediately, saving the engine for engine protection. So that is an awesome thing that Haltech offers that I really, really love, and which is one of the reasons why we went with Haltech. But again, back to the fuel system. We've got a dash 8 line underneath here, which goes down and runs all the way along the car, right next to the feed line. So here's where it comes out of the tank, which is the RACEWORKS bulkhead fitting, which is a 90-degree bulkhead, straight into another 90, down into the RACEWORKS fuel filter, all the way up to the front of the car. So this is what the car looks like on the underneath side. We've got the line separators here from RACEWORKS, dash 8 lines all the way down the car. I've put a couple of extra cable ties just for some good measure, just to stop any extra sag. Once they get full of fuel, they might become a bit heavier, so that's looped onto the brake line. But these are solid mounted, they're not going to go anywhere all the way along. Underneath here, and you'll notice nothing hangs lower than the sill. And then we turn the corner again and then up into the back, which I'll show you in just a moment. But I'm sure you're probably wondering why I didn't run straight lines all the way straight down the car. It's because the floor pan actually sits lower than the frame rail here. This actually hangs down quite a bit lower, so if you dump your VL, you'll be scraping on the ground, and I didn't want it anywhere near anything else here. But continuing on, we've got the dash 8 fuel filter, also from RACEWORKS, of course. And then we have the flex fuel sensor in the billet RACEWORKS bracket, and I've made a little custom bracket there using all the existing holes that were in the floor. So that goes from a dash 8 to a dash 6 through the flex fuel sensor, out as a dash 6, and then once it comes out, it splits into a Y piece, which is another awesome billet part from RACEWORKS, into two dash 6 lines. One goes into the original feed, which drops the fuel directly in the bowl on top of the fuel pump, and this one follows the original path into the swirl pot over here, and it's swirling the fuel around here in the bowl. So I think we've solved that issue, and the fuel tank obviously is all back up in the car. So the next thing to do is put some fuel in it. Because we didn't get finished with the proper tune on 98, I'm going to stick some 98 back in there, and I haven't got the wiring done for the flex fuel sensor for now. That's it for now. You're not going to see the car running and driving in this video. The next time you'll see it will be back at George's dyno for some final tuning, power runs on 98, switch it over to E85, power runs on E85, and then the project is completed, finally. But thanks again to RACEWORKS for all of the parts on this fuel system and pretty much the entire build, really. Absolutely amazing. We've got the best of the best stuff in the car, and I couldn't have done it without you guys. This looks absolutely second to none, and I'm really, really happy with how that turned out. The billet black street look of everything just keeps it nice and stealthy. At a quick glance, it doesn't look like anything special, which is what we wanted. We didn't want to go too wild and too Larry with everything, but I'm really, really happy with how this turned out. Anyway, that's enough for this video. Don't forget, spool up, bring the boost. We'll see you in the next video. Cheers.